The people of Kenya achieved some major victories against their government over recent weeks. Through weeks of protests, they've managed to get their government to withdraw a $1 billion tax bill that would have imposed even greater burdens on the already overtaxed and economically burdened society. President William Ruto also scrapped his cabinet, although the people say that he has reappointed some of the same people in the new cabinet that he just announced. Kenyans have paid a heavy price. Dozens of people have died. But the citizens insist that they are not backing down and they're willing to keep up the protest action as long as it takes until William Ruto and his government listens to the voice of the people. And this brings me back to the last time when Jamaicans stood up to their government and said enough was enough. It was the government of PJ Patterson that decided, let me jack up the gas tax all the way up here and see how much we can squeeze the people to accept the pressure. Unfortunately for PJ and the PNP government, Jamaicans were already under a lot of economic pressure at that time, and a whole lot of issues collide, and the people said, enough is enough.
In April of 1999, the Patterson-led administration announced that a 31% tax would be imposed on all petroleum products, including diesel, leaded, and unleaded fuel, to raise $2.8 billion to plug a gap in the budget. The announcement sent shockwaves through the country. People from all walks of life quickly came to the realization that an increase in gas prices would cause a ripple effect on consumer goods across the board. Farmers and market vendors said that the increased costs of transporting their goods would leave them no choice but to increase their prices. And taxi drivers from across the country demanded a fair increase to compensate for higher gas prices. The PNP government said the tax increase was necessary to save the country from economic collapse. But the opposition Jamaica Labour Party saw an opportunity and began organizing protests under the theme, Bury the Axe, Cut the Tax. Now, not all the protests were associated with the JLP. Many of these protests were just organic, and people were feeling economic pressures even before the tax announcement was made. So they just joined in the protest movement because the opportunity was there. From Negril Point to Moran Point, commercial activity ground to a halt. Public transportation virtually was non-existent. Taxi drivers and bus drivers abandoned their routes, forcing many commuters to walk long distances to get to work if they could ever make it at all. Children could not go to school. The country was virtually on a lockdown. Add to that, the security forces were greatly outnumbered by the number of protesters that had come out across the country. Police across the island were kept busy clearing roadblocks, and in some instances, they could only watch as some protesters began looting and burning buildings. The widespread backlash pushed PJ Patterson to request a meeting with opposition leader Edward Seaga. But this was after Patterson had defiantly said that there would be no rollback. Seaga declined to meet and said there would be no purpose in meeting if Patterson had already made a decision. Meanwhile, the Gleaner reported that members of PNP leadership had met with some area leaders in its stronghold communities and asked for their help to prevent further unrest and roadblocks. The government also set up a task force to look at alternatives for plugging the budget shortfall. Finally, the government relented and announced a 50% rollback of the tax. The Gleaner archive shows letters to the editor flooding in the aftermath of the protests. Some were sympathetic to the cause, while others decried the quote-unquote loss of decency and the damage done to Jamaica's reputation. One letter writer said that Jamaicans have had to undergo numerous injustices at the hand of a self-serving, irresponsible and greedy government which continues to doctor the reports to make it seem like the country is all right. One of the more profound comments came from Samir Yunis, then president of the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, whose address to a board of directors meeting was republished in the Gleaner. He said, quote, "The country should have been prepared through dialogue for an increase in gas and so cushion the shock that should also have been anticipated. If we have not learned a lesson from what happened last week and understood the message that our people were sending to our political directorate, then all our losses would have been in vain."
So what can you learn from all this? Well, from past riots in Jamaica to the current protests in Kenya, it is a reminder that when the people are pushed to the limit, they will fight back. And like the Kenyan government, perhaps the Jamaican government won't know what that limit is until the people let them know that they've crossed it. If you've been enjoying my videos, I encourage you to sign up for IMP 2024. The Intercultural Media Project will be held on August 16th, and I'm bringing together journalists from different countries, researchers, and people who are affected by oppressive systems, and looking at how the media chooses to cover these issues. The link is in the description below. I hope to see you there.